mayor, but he's the vice
So
president.
for the Democrat,
I can
to be a
right.
delegate at their convention, you only have to pay a $50.
Maybe that's why we have the whole state.
Maybe.
Yes. Yes. That's what I've always done. I was never really sure if that was right.
Yeah, $50. I'm not sure that.
So that was with
Yeah, I do this very often.
NDOT
I'm so
yesterday,
happy.
looking at your
I like to do
construction of the Man Road Bridge. And his
There is no
construction-
bridge anymore.
I know.
The bridge is gone.
Well, and the Madison Avenue Bridge.
And I heard some scuttlebutt that there was a big delay on the Man Road Bridge.
There's a big one on, so I'm not missing. There's a
That's
big
what I seen on the face page.
so I'm not missing, but I'm
That's a
going.
good amount of time. Honestly, you probably shouldn't worry about it.
Why are we on here?
Nobody wants to
I
sit
seen
in
it.
the
I just
front
kept
row.
scrolling. I'm like, I'm not.
We could have stayed much longer. Had a great time. Tel Aviv is.
Have you guys been in here?
We have not had committee in here
We
since
could have spent the whole
pre-COVID.
day in
It feels like normal and nice.
just, we're rushing from.
That's how we felt.
No.
9/11 Memorial in New York. Like you could,
Oh, I left it back. Okay, thank you.
we did like in 3 days. I think, so we were trying to.
Is Erica coming down?
Like I don't do it by hand.
When we get to the second thing, when we get to the second thing, you can ask that question.
Can't take it all. You can't just be there in that atmosphere all day.
I was so upset when I found out that we could have seen the Statue of Liberty too if we were just going to the top of that building right next to the memorial.
Yeah. The last time I was in New York, though, it wasn't. They didn't have the. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll be back in here. I feel like I'm in a little plexiglass.
Like gerbil case.
Yeah.
So I always feel like I'm in some second grade class, but I'm a gerbil. And the wheel running while I'm
I always thought of it as like a fish tank.
fish tank. Yeah.
But the best thing is, like, in the reflection of it, I can watch the PowerPoint.
That's what I was saying. People always
It's like,
try to stay-
it's like I'm just staring out there in the distance.
I
But
always want to look over at Bob and put my hand on it, like in like the prison scene.
So there's
wanted to bring an
boots
extra
and
marker
D-ring
and draw.
coming?
Put myself
Must
in
not
like
be
an
because
astronaut moment one day.
they don't have their things out.
Yeah, but
So
with
they
the
must
dry
be not
race.
coming.
Yeah.
I met with Boots yesterday.
I don't know who you sit next to.
Maybe he was with Bob.
During full council,
Bob got
Keith
covered.
and Allie.
Keith, now you can like take
You
the
knew
dry
I was
race
like,
and
yeah.
look at you can
Lauren
draw a
has that.
mustache on.
Last week at the party, but
She
that
got
was
up the next
outside.
day. Thank God it was outside. Yeah.
That's a really funny thing. I think
I was never close to her, so.
Well, we're gonna wait another minute for Councilor Oliver to get here. You know, he was excited to be here. You're seeing plexiglass.
I talked to Duke.
It's not. It's normal.
It's not normal for
I
us.
know.
I know. This is not so normal for us. Well, and that's what I see them like, touch each other.
Does this mean that the fish bowls are coming down?
We don't know.
My hope is that this is the start of that.
Well, the elevator separation thing was taken away.
Yeah,
Was that last
yeah.
week
There's a
before?
number of things that,
Yeah.
that I think if we're gonna do it halfway, what's the point of doing it halfway? So just do
Well,
it.
we use it for Board of Public Works, and it is really hard to see
No kidding. You think?
anybody testifying in.
Testifying, each other, we can't hear each other talk. Poor Counselor Oliver. You know, yeah. It's just hard to hear people talk. Besides not being able to see anything either, and the TV doesn't do it any justice either. All you see are those partitions.
Are you going to do the traffic stuff first? Should we actually go into the audience? Is there stuff, isn't there stuff for Nathan?
Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to do them first? You can.
They'll take 5 minutes. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah, he can.
Chair's choice.
You guys don't have to move. He can just stand there.
Nathan, do you want to go first?
I'm here for the whole thing,
Yeah.
so.
Well, I don't think that they've actually
We
gathered
haven't
in
started yet, but look, we can go ahead and get started now. We'll wait. I know Councilor Oliver will be here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June 16th City Council Committee for Public Works. We will begin today's meeting. First of all, welcome back, everybody, to our official committee room. It's great. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited to be here. Hopefully, this is the start of some normalizing. But we'll begin today's meeting with introductions of councilors, and we'll begin on the left side with Councilor Dilk.
Councilor Dilk, District 24.
Councilor Bain, District 20.
Councilor Michael Paul Hart, District 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Mallory, District 25.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen Jones, District 16.
Jessica McCormick, District 15.
Counselor McCorm, what? I need a break, guys. Krista Carlino, District 6, West Side.
Councilor Gray, District 8.
And I'm Zach Adamson, District 17, the near north, near east, and near southeast sides of downtown. With consent, I'd like to take proposals number 211, 212, 213, and 214, and 215 together. Very good. Thanks. Go ahead, Nathan. You're up.
Good afternoon, Nathan Sheets, Department of Public Works, and as mentioned, I have 5 proposals before you this evening. All are basically speed limit reductions in various neighborhoods in a number of council districts, and we'll start with proposal number 211, 2022. This authorizes a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the Breckenridge, Emerald Ridge at the Point, Diamond Ridge at the Point, Franklin Park Estates, Birchwood Park, and Franklin Shire subdivisions, and those fall within District 25. Proposal number 212, 2022 authorizes a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the Devon Woods, Devon Hills, Devon Ridge, Devon Lake, and Devon Court subdivisions. Those fall in District 9. Proposal number 213, 2022 authorizes a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the Georgetown Crossing, Highwoods, Bonham Place, Wides, 30th and Kessler, Green Hills, Wood Creek, Robertson Village, Cheswick Place, Fairway Woods, Northern Estates, Wolfington on Kessler Boulevard, and Arbordale Highlands subdivisions, and that is District 8. Proposal number 214, 2022 authorizes a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the Park Valley Estates, Building Trades, Glicks, Brookview, Trinity Manor, Autumn Ridge, Creekwood Hills, Springs of Hampton, Grassy Creek, Creekside Woods, Creekside Meadows, and Cedar Springs subdivisions. That's District 19. And proposal number 215, 2022 authorizes a speed limit reduction to 25 miles per hour in the Glenview Park, Valley Ridge Farms, and Hunters Run subdivisions, and those fall within both Districts 20 and 20 and 23. And if you have questions about the 5 proposals before you this evening, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Very good. Thank you, Nathan. Are there any questions from councilors on any of these 5 proposals? No? Seeing none, we'll ask the did you have a question? No. We'll ask, is there anyone from the public who has any questions or comments about any of these 5 proposals? Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion moved. So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to send proposals number 211, 212, 213, 214, and 215 to the full council with a due pass recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Very good. Thanks, Nathan. All right, moving on to proposal number 206, which approves additional appropriations totaling $15 million in the 2022 budget of the Department of Public Works, Department of Parks, Recreation, and Office of Finance and Management for Transportation, General Parks, General Consolidated City County. General funds to finance the design, construction, and inspection of recreational and capital infrastructure projects, and for additional recruitment measures to address enterprise staffing needs. This is going to be Ken.
Yes.
All right, well, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, it's good to see you all. Glad to be back in the committee hearing room. Glad to be here. We're going to go over our proposal, which we're calling Circle City Forward Phase 4, which is taking advantage of income tax supplemental distribution that we've received from the state of Indiana from our trust account. We often receive these each year, and so I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of it, but we're happy to have something to put forward in front of you that'll help us with some infrastructure needs specifically. Our previous Circle City Forward investments are here, Phase 1, 2, and 3. Just as a reminder, the council has obviously approved these and moved these forward, and we're working diligently on all of them. The first was a set of public facilities and investments across the city in much needed areas, including our solid waste garage, a number of parks, including rebuilding of Frederick Douglass Park, and a number of other park improvements, as well as a new crime lab, youth and family services center, animal care facility, coroner facilities. Truly a massive investment, one we've not seen in a long time in our facilities. Which we're happy about. Residential streets, which I think this group is especially happy about. We invested another $25 million in residential streets. Really, this was paid out of our continued taking care of our finances here as a city, which we've done a phenomenal job of doing underspend and really underestimating our revenue numbers so that we would have dollars in our fund balances to appropriate, which is how we were able to do residential streets. And the same is true of greenways. As a result, after our audited financial reports, we made the decision to make another major investment in greenways last year as well. So that was for Circle City Forward Phase 3. Going into the supplemental distribution and understanding of how this works, our income tax is collected at the state level by the Department of Revenue. When you file your taxes, obviously, that goes, you're filing with the Department of Revenue at the state level as well as the federal government. State collects our income tax that is due here in Marion County and Indianapolis, the city of Indianapolis, and then they have put together a way in which they hold a trust account for us to protect in the difficult times. I'm here, and I can't help but note that that balance has gotten incredibly high. They're currently holding over $100 million of our dollars that could be allocated here in the city and county, and we would love to take advantage of, but they modify those rules and that equation each year to determine how much they need to hold back. So they continue to hold larger and larger amount each year to recession-proof all local units of government, not just ours, but all local units of government. Needless to say, ours is the largest balance at the state of Indiana that they are holding. But despite that and my complaints about them holding those dollars, they do provide us a supplemental distribution when the income tax comes above what they certify as a distribution during budget. So each year during budget, we get a certified distribution that we agree on with the Department of Revenue. We enter that in our budget that we provide to the council and let you know what that revenue number will be. They continue to collect taxes for the remainder of the year. And if the target if they end up collecting more than what they thought was what the target would be, we get a supplemental distribution. So that supplemental distribution was deposited with us this spring. We're bringing it to you now for an appropriation to take advantage of those additional dollars. I do want to make it clear that we are incredibly conservative in our approach to revenue. We have been this entire administration. And the result of that is these investments we're able to make in Circle City Forward, but also a strong credit rating. It's led to a number of very positive results for us and low bond cost as we bond against things. So I'm proud to say that we continue to do that and we continue to protect the fund balances wherever we can. Many other local governments in Indiana go ahead and budget these dollars as a part of operational, and we never have in our time in the administration. I think it's key for you all to understand that's why we come back with this. So we actually know the number and we're certain before we spend it. And so that is why we're here today. Yes, so Proposal 206 provides allocations, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, into the Office of Finance and Management. That piece is for an enterprise-wide staff recruitment. Many of you, as counselors, have heard from our agency and department heads and elected officials and leaders in the agencies and departments how difficult it is right now to recruit. We're working on a number of different proposals to actually improve that overall and improve compensation for the agencies and departments so that we are more successful in that. A number of agencies and departments have already implemented a new compensation plan, and it's showing a lot of promise, getting a lot more responses to our applications in those areas. The Mayor's Action Center, the County Recorder, even in our HR department. So we are seeing progress there. Nonetheless, we have some challenging areas that we would like to make some investments in advertising our jobs and doing a little bit more in recruitment efforts than the city has had to before. Typically, city and county jobs are ones that people want, and they have been for a long time, and we haven't had to do a lot of recruiting, if I'm being really honest with you. This is the most challenging job market the city's been in decades, and so we've got to put some money into recruitment this year. So we would like to take $1 million out of this to work on putting together some proposals specifically focused on public works jobs. That is our top priority, as well as public safety jobs. And so those are absolutely necessities from our operations of city county government. We need to fill those roles as fast as we can, and so our intent through my HR department is to invest in recruitment in those areas. Parks capital projects, I'll go into a little detail on before I pass it on to Dan to cover our road construction. In Parks capital, we have allocated $1 million here. We worked with the Parks Department to determine some of their top priorities and items they'd like to achieve over and above what we've already done with American Rescue Funds and the investments we're making there, as well as Circle City Forward phases that we've made those investments. There are some other items that have been identified, and I'll go over those with you now. We have had the opportunity to acquire some more land at Grassy Creek Park on the east side. We have $550,000 we're going to allocate towards that effort. There are a number of parcels that have come up for sale that are an opportunity that the city does not want to pass up in growing a regional park on the far east side. We've been super proud to already make an investment in that through our bonding in Circle City Forward Phase 1 to build an environmental education center and some shelter houses out at that location, which they have not had. But this is really complementary to our Grassy Creek Trail investments we'll be making in the long term. And so we feel like this is a good use of these funds to continue to grow that regional park. I always mess up this. Gustafson. I got to say it fast. Gustafson Park. $210,000 for comfort stations at that park. I believe, Councilor Carlino, I believe that's in your district. This specifically is focused on the pool is an area you can't get to without having a pool pass. Of course, this year, free pools, and we're excited about that. But in a normal time, when the rest of the park is being utilized, there's not a place to have a restroom. We want to put those restrooms in place at that park. And that actually ranked high on our race and income index through the parks. And so this ranked as an 8 out of 10. And so it was an ideal project to take on with these additional dollars. $200,000 at Bethel Park. And this is actually to build a football field. There's an open field that's kind of unutilized out there today. We'd like to put in a football field to be able to utilize that and also build a parking lot so the parents could come there and we can have some, football leagues actually going on at the park and program it for the neighborhood around there. That's Councilor Mascari's district. Again, ranked an 8 out of 10 on our race and income index score. Watkins Park, there has actually been a significant number of dollars invested from citizens sharing the DREAM initiative inside the facility, the family center there. We are wanting to invest some dollars for the outside of the facility, and so we are going to commission an artist to spend, and we're going to spend $20,000 to actually wrap the facade in some art in the area, a mural that will wrap the entire facade, so that it'll be more attractive and not look a little dingy, a little dated, and I think people don't know there's really programming and things going in there. We want to invite the neighborhood in. We think this $20,000 with arts may be a helpful way to do that. And then we also want to do $20,000 in pre-development strategic planning for Pride Park. Pride Park is a tiny park in the Norwood neighborhood. We've been working with that neighborhood and those neighborhood groups for some time. I think it's a great opportunity to start putting together a plan for what that park could be. And that neighborhood has expressed an interest in the city helping, and so we would like to, with these additional dollars we were able to find, go ahead and start building a strategic plan for them for what that park could become, and in doing the stakeholder engagement and work to understand what the long term of Pride Park could be. So those are the park's capital projects and the enterprise-wide staff recruitment. I'll hand it over to Director Parker to cover the road construction.
Thank you, Ken. Dan Parker, Director, DPW. 13 of the $15 million part of Proposal 206 is for road construction. $10 million for immediate road construction that would commence upon passage. At least one segment in each of the 25 councilmatic districts. And then $3 million dedicated for the design of a future round of residential streets that we'll talk about. So the immediate road construction, you see the 25 segments that are in each district. We've highlighted the West 56th Street, which was recommended by Councilor Carlino. This is a street, which a lot of these streets are, streets that our crews have had to go back over and over and over again this spring. This spring has been incredibly challenging due to the wet nature of it. I know it feels like 105 out there right now, but we have not gone a week without rain all year. So what this immediate construction is to target those streets where our crews have had to go over and over and over again, and you just really can't pothole patch it anymore. So you see those. The commitment was at least one in each district, and that's what we'll get done. The second part of the fiscal, and this example is District 24, is residential streets. As Ken mentioned, we had Circle City Forward Phase 2, which was really the first investments in residential street reconstruction in a long time. This would be the design money for that next round. So the construction money is not tied to it because we'd need at least 9 to 10 months for design. The bidding for those projects would be next year. Hopefully, if Ken can find more money, we can attach some construction money to those projects.
No pressure.
Yes. As I've noted to each one of you, this year, last year we targeted by segment. This year we've given you each maps of each platted neighborhood. And we've asked each of you to submit your priorities in order based on neighborhood, not by street, so that we can try to save a little money because we did go over the $25 million. Part of that was a little bit of inflation as well, but try to keep those costs down to stay into the $25 million price range if, like I said, Ken can find the money. So $10 million for immediate road construction, $3 million for design. Mr. Chairman, that's our proposal.
Great. Thank you, Director Ken. Very exciting stuff. I'm really glad to see a lot of the streets on the list that I saw coming to me, a lot of the neighborhoods that need a lot of work for a long time. Are there questions or comments from councilors? Councilor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got caught up a little bit in the traffic. Excuse me, my fellow councilor. East 46th Street got 2 segments. What does that mean?
So East 46th Street,
in my district, yes.
In your district, that segment between sort of Keystone and Emerson is the target area. We did not put the to and fro on here just because that's going to be sort of the scope of where we're going to look at to get the work done. Councilor Brown asked for 46th Street further east, and so that's the second segment of East 46th Street that was put on there.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I ask, can you let us know where these segments are so that when we're going over our list of plats, that we're not asking for those to be done as part of these?
So these are on major thoroughfares. What the plats that you have, those are residential streets. So the PCI index that you see on here does not indicate the PCI of the thoroughfare that's in that area. That's just the average PCI for the residential streets. So those are designated, and we can have Nathan come up and tell you the difference between them, but that's what we consider residential streets. So any streets that were listed here are not a part of that at all.
All right. So, but my question is so I've got some areas that I'm looking at thinking, oh yeah, this neighborhood really needs some attention. But what I'm thinking primarily of are those thoroughfares because that's what everybody drives on. So if I knew which ones you were already focusing on, I might be able to pull that one out of my head and look at the neighborhood
So-
as a larger.
So part of the reason for these streets here is that they're not programmed in our 5-year capital budget.
Right.
In the transportation capital plan, these streets are not there. And so what we are looking at is that, so none of these streets would be ready for a full-depth reconstruction. It's to get immediate help.
Okay.
So if you're looking at in your neighborhoods, I mean, I see East St. Clair on here, that's the first one that pops to mind.
Right.
But that would not be designated as a residential street, even
Right.
though you probably, there's our residences on it.
Right.
But it's not a residential street from our classification standpoint.
Right, and it's definitely a street that's had repeated trips out there to
Yes,
fix.
particularly by
President
Oriental.
right in front of the Fringe Theater, yeah. Okay, questions, Councilor Hart, and then Councilor Mowry, and then Councilor Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my first one is on, you mentioned the $100 million reserve of COET funds that's held by the state. How long did it take for that to build up?
It's been a couple of decades worth of time that it's been building up. It was during, and I wasn't in my role, but I believe it was during Mitch Daniels' time as governor that this was created as the way to manage the local governments so that they didn't get into trouble, which is brilliant, for the record. I don't have anything wrong with it. My problem is how high it's gotten, and then I just think some more dollars should be cascaded back down to us, and that we're unique in that list of local
92.
units.
Gotcha. And then for the staffing requirements, where some of these other funds are going, have you considered employee experience and how you're measuring that when trying to bring folks on? Because I spend a lot of time professionally in this field of the Great Resignation, and I deal with companies all the time that are trying to bring staff in. And I wrote down the 3 words that always come into mind in my world, because it's IT, right? It's a digital employee experience. But you can remove the word digital and just still have employee experience, because I assume if they're DPW or public safety workers, they're probably still going to be in the field. So technology would still be important. It'd be part of their role. But that experience the employee is having has been something just tied to a lot of why we see just nationally employees jumping from organization to organization. And so are we doing anything to measure that in when we're trying to bring folks on, or with existing folks that we're measuring what their experience is today and how we can improve it so we can provide incentive to actually fill folks and fill some of those gaps?
Yeah, there's a couple of things we've done. It was a couple of years ago that we did an actual engagement survey of city county government. There were a number of items that were recognized during that, and I'll be fully transparent with you that pay was not asked. The questions about pay were not asked at the time. And so that was obviously something we knew was a significant issue that needed to be addressed. And so a lot of the questions were about what motivated employees, what were the things they wanted to see, what are the things they wanted to see changed. And so we took that, and that's a lot of things that you guys have actually approved now, right? We went through, obviously we did pay scales, we've done we've changed the holiday calendar, we've added parental leave. That was something, I want this to be a place where I can have a family. I want flexible work arrangements. I want to be able to work certain days at home, remote work. We've added all of those items over time. There are some that we can't, right? So if you're a police officer or you're working in solid waste, those jobs are what they are. Where we try to spend time on those jobs about their experience, a lot of things that I hear directly either from the unions or leadership in the departments has been more about our facilities, our equipment. What are you providing me that I get in every day? And so Dan can speak, and Mr. Chairman, you've been a huge supporter of this. We've made major investments, obviously, in equipment. We have not gotten where we need to yet on facilities. And Dan and I have worked on that. Solid waste was really high on the list. That's why it ended up in Circle City Forward, but there are a number of others. We're really proud of Northwest District. Actually getting a tour next week with Rick Snyder. We're going out to just make sure you can see kind of what we've done and the investment we've made out there for the Northwest District headquarters for IMPD. Already working on the next headquarters for IMPD and trying to build better facilities. Have a plan to replace every single police pursuit vehicle. I've been ordering them on the regular to replace those. It was a big complaint when I started as controller from both the chief as well as Rick as the president of the union, that was the #1 priority. And so we found some money to allocate and dedicate in the first budget I put together that allows us to lease those vehicles. And so those pieces are there. I will say, every job is so different.
Right.
The jobs down in the clerk's office, they're transactional nature. These are high school degrees, coming in, learning on an SOP, and then doing the job. The clerk, I do what I can do from my perspective, and then the clerk has to build a culture within their organization too. And so it's a trade-off of I can do only so much. The same is true of Dan. Dan's worked, and I think worked really closely with AFSCME to build a partnership and a relationship in which the employees feel supported and they feel like there's support from our organization. We've made it a point when we've gotten federal money to do these bonuses, even in the years where there were zeros in there, in terms of raises. We've found ways all over the place to do what we can. But I will say it's never going to be enough in this kind of an environment. We're just in an incredibly challenging environment. And so I think part of this and why we're asking for this is that maybe there's an education on what a pension means, and what in this kind of an atmosphere that can do for someone, right? We're watching the market. There's something we have to offer that's different. The time off is different. Parental leave, there are a number of things we have in flexibility that you won't get just anywhere. And so every single job, I would say we're looking at differently. My office is so different than what Dan's doing every day, right, with his team. So we're trying to address them individually as much as we can.
Okay, and I appreciate that answer. I mean, because I can tell you that one thing that pertains to this committee is we recently got an update that heavy trash was going to be missed. And, we all have 45, 50,000 people in our districts, and all those people don't follow us online.
Right.
So we don't have all their emails, so it's really hard to get that out, and I'm driving up
It
down
wasn't
the
missed
street.
this week.
It was, well,
Counselor?
and I'm seeing couches and all these things, mattresses, and in my mind I'm just like, oh my goodness, how can I, at scale, get to all these folks and tell them like, it's not coming, and then, it looks bad, right? And so I appreciate what's going on here and trying to get those folks. Agreed. Agreed. So I appreciate the answer. Last one was when it comes to the park. I seen the appropriation in the character for the investment, but I didn't see anything for maintenance. Is there a conflict there?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So we're proud to have increased the maintenance budget over the last 4 years by $1.25 million. I think we're at $5.6 million a year now on parks maintenance. I can promise you that the Parks Department is going to make an additional request for additional maintenance dollars in their budget, and we'll see what we can do to make sure we can support that. But that should be a part of the operational budget, right? So that's on me, and you can hold me accountable, Counselor.
Thank you, sir.
When we get to budget introduction.
Thank you, Councilor Hart. Those were great questions. I appreciate the dialogue on that one. But you reminded me of something earlier. I wanted to ask about that trust that they're holding. Does that interest on those dollars, do they go back into the trust, or?
I believe they do go back into the trust.
Not being siphoned off the top.
Yeah, no, I believe they go back into the trust.
Okay, just making sure they're.
My staff definitely knows that.
Our income
I'm sorry I
tax
don't
is
have them here,
benefiting us. Yeah,
but that's a good question.
Okay,
That's a good question.
Thanks, Councilor Hart.
No.
I'm sorry, Maury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess we're having a little bit of issue with the names here today, so we'll get through it eventually here.
I at least remembered my name.
Yeah, you got your name down. My question was on the immediate road construction, the $10 million. You had Emerson Avenue listed here. Does that have to do with the widening of Emerson Avenue? What is that
No,
curtailed?
that selection of Emerson Avenue was by Councilor Larison, and it's from Washington Street. The target area is sort of Washington Street to 16th Street. The Emerson Avenue, that's the border between you and Councilor Dilk, is getting widened this year, and then the second piece of it is it bids in January, and it'll be done next year.
Perfect. I appreciate that. One of the other questions I had for you, with kind of talking about these road construction projects, it came to my attention last night from a constituent that had helped with the comp plan back in the early 2000s that Thompson Road had been identified to be a 4-lane road. I think I'm sure in every district there's a handful of road, streets, roads, or whatever you want to call it, that can be identified as similar. Given that this was back in the early 2000s, that when Thompson was identified to be 4 lanes wide, when do we expect to start seeing some of that done? I mean, Emerson Avenue, I understand, Representative Mike Speedy was the district councilor in he had identified Emerson Avenue needed to be widened. I guess I'm just curious, how long did it take for us to identify that it needs to be done, and then when did we get it actually done? Because it seems like there's a lag here.
So a lot of widening projects, when the Indy Moves Transportation Integration Plan happened in 2018, 2019, a lot of widening projects were taken out of the long-range transportation plan. And part of that is widening projects are incredibly expensive. I'm going to ask Erica. Erica, what is the total cost for Emerson? If you could come up to the microphone. Yeah. So they're incredibly expensive. And so we're very strategic in any of the projects that are widenings. We're not doing a lot of widenings moving forward. We're being very strategic with it. Primarily, we actually want to go the other way, which is we want to take lanes out that we don't need. We have a lot of pavement out there. We're going to hear later on the agenda. The chairman put on the HNTV report that was asked by Councilor Bain. You'll see how much pavement we have. Every widening, if we add more lanes, we're not getting any more money from the state. So we're being very strategic. I understand that there's not a 4-lane road across the south side. That's part of the reason why we've focused on County Line Road between 69 and 65 to make that a 4-lane road. But I can't sit here and tell you that Thompson Road, I don't know if it was removed out of the Indy Moves plan as a widening, but that's part of the reason. They're incredibly expensive. How much is Emerson?
So there are two separate.
You have to identify yourself at the microphone first.
Erica Miller, I'm Deputy Director. There are two separate phases. One is 13.7 million, and the other is 16 million.
So it's an almost $30 million project, some of which is funded federally, but that's part of the reason we have to put in 20% of the construction cost for that. So 20% of the construction cost of that project is bigger than most of the other projects that we have going around the city. So even though the federal portion of that is important, it's part of the reason why a lot of the widenings were sort of looked at like, how many can we do? And we have to be very, very strategic. We finished one on the north side on 82nd Street to finish that to Fall Creek Road. We're doing Emerson. We're looking at County Line. But for the most part, it would consume a good portion of our budget.
Well, I appreciate the explanation. You mentioned County Line from 69 to Emerson. I would encourage us to look all the way to 5 Points, just because of the fact that right now we have a proposal that's coming up for the MDC to create an industrial park there at County Line in Arlington, which would then result in an influx of traffic, especially with commercial vehicles. I would encourage us to be able to try to figure out something for, even all the way to 5 Points. That's another few blocks that's going to be able to widen that road and help adjust for that influx of traffic, because while I think that it may be a good idea for an industrial park to be there, I think the infrastructure needs to be able to keep up. And when I hear you saying that we're looking at taking lanes away from districts, I pray to God that it's not District 25, because with the boom of housing and residential development that we've had, we are desperate in dire need for updates in our infrastructure and the widening of certain roads, even if it's just a 2-lane with a turn lane, so a 3-lane road. I would hope that we can at some point start looking rather than reactive. I know with the MPO you said we have to meet certain criteria to be able to qualify for those dollars. I would hope that moving forward that we can get to a point where we are proactive rather than reactive, because right now what we've seen, especially in District 25, is such a housing boom that it creates a 30-minute line of traffic because we have a stop sign or stoplight. Putting more roundabouts in, we've done a great job with that. We're starting to really get into the roundabouts phase, and I appreciate that. But I would love to see us be a little more proactive so that we can actually handle the influx of housing and the influx of travelers and cars and vehicles traveling down these roads, rather than, we're getting all these new neighborhoods and all of a sudden it's just creating congestion left and right. So I appreciate everything we're doing, but I would urge us to be a little more proactive on some of our development with infrastructure.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Gray.
Yes, Tim, I have one question. Of this $100 million, what's the total amount that we get?
So all of those dollars are technically the city's. We get an allocation each year, and the Department of Revenue determines how much we get. So this is 15 million this year.
So we get, and it's all coming to DPW? The total
There's a mix here. 13 million to DPW, $1 million to Parks, and $1 million to our HR department.
Okay. Only thing seems to me that the far east side and the far west side seem to be getting all this 10 million. We're in the middle. We ain't getting too much. So in the next $10 million distribution, let's try and.
I would note, Councilor Gray, that West 62nd Street is that segment for your district, and I think we.
No. That's way too far from me.
No, from Michigan Road to.
Oh, that part ain't. It's not on here.
Yes, the segment is West 62nd Street right there.
Okay, well, I'll take that back.
Just above West 30th Street.
Because I don't want you to take it off there.
That's Michigan Road to, I believe it was Moeller?
Georgetown?
Georgetown? Yeah.
Okay, all right. Great. Great job, Tim.
Any other questions or comments? Counselor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Parker and Controller Clark. Just two quick questions on the 100 million. So is the balance of that after we get this going to be 85 million? Or is the balance usually at 100 million and anything over that is what we get back every year?
No, they change each year. I appreciate the question. Each year, the formula is changed based on our overall portion or all income tax, right? So that we're collecting. So that number keeps creeping up each year and get higher and higher. And then they give us a portion and they determine that each year. So we don't know what portion they'll decide because the formula does change and how much they hold in the trust account. So that trust account was lower by 10 to 20 million in the last few years, and it just keeps growing. So it will grow each year. And that number will continue to grow forever unless they change the formula and decide to allocate more back down to the local units. They just haven't made that determination in terms of the formula at the Department of Revenue.
Gotcha. And then just the one other question that I had was on the new way we're looking at the residential funding or the residential road construction, how we're no longer just targeting individual roads, but targeting neighborhoods, which I think is definitely the way to go. When we send you like one of the neighborhoods that are on our list, and what happens then? Do you go in and evaluate each street in that neighborhood? Like, do you determine like, well, only half this neighborhood that we sent you is actually deemed like, does it need actually reconstructed? Because I'm just wondering, like, if we send DPW out there and they do half the neighborhood, then another half of the neighborhood is going to be really upset that their roads didn't get done.
Yeah, and we're going to have that this year with the targeting by segment. This segment was done, but this segment right here is not being done. So what we'll do is we'll send our engineering teams in to each of the priorities that you identify to try to maximize the amount of dollars that are allocated for your district for the design, construction, and inspection of the roads to see how many we can get done, with the goal being to raise the average PCI for the entire neighborhood by targeting the worst streets in that neighborhood that you identify. So in one neighborhood it might be 3 streets, in another neighborhood it might be 2. You know, so with the dollars available, and just understand the dollars aren't going to go as far as they went last year based on prices. So all the prices are going up. So it's going to be targeted better, more cost efficient, but there's going to be less segments because of the cost of materials, the cost of labor, et cetera.
Thank you, Counselor. Can you tell me, is that formula that the state is using that you were talking about a minute ago, is that an arbitrary formula? They just think this up every year, or
No,
is there...
they're incredibly smart people.
Oh, no, I'm sure they are.
Give them the credit of, like, they're in this whole concept, especially, just be clear, like when the pandemic started and we were fretting about what could happen and what we were going to do with income tax and what it was going to mean. The knowledge that was there, was one of my first week's calls, was to the Department of Revenue. We all got on the line with the governor's team and said, so you're going to contemplate giving us some of this. Is the whole point, right? Is like, this is why it's there. And then, you know, we ended up coming out stronger than we expected, first of
Right.
all, on income tax, because the truth of that, even when you guys all saw the unemployment you did, was that those were low-wage workers who lost their jobs.
Right.
And the higher-wage workers continued, and so we didn't plummet as much as what I thought was going to happen initially, because everyone went home and worked. But they do modify it each year, and so it's based on a number of different pieces of a formula, right? What are our growth factors? What are they seeing in the economy? They make those determinations. I don't get to see the formula. I don't get to have a say in the formula. It is their role by state law that they determine it.
So is there a way that we can find out, we as the fiscal body for the city, that we could have at least an idea of indicators that we can be looking out for so that we can say, hey, look, we're seeing these variables that are evolving throughout the year or into the next year, and then we can identify to say, hey, look, we would anticipate a modification in the amount that we got in that overage to at least get an idea.
Yeah.
Because as we're trying to prioritize things that we want to as the fiscal body, it helps for us to have at least a little bit of a hand in understanding those numbers that they're using to drive those numbers.
Yeah.
That formulation.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So we have a team who we utilize to project out our expectation of income tax each year and what we think will be certified and what will be supplemental. So we do our best to back into what we think the formula will be. We've had varying degrees of accuracy in doing that. And so we're always a little hesitant to run around with numbers that we don't know are real or not. But during budget and during budget introduction, I think it's a perfectly good place for me to tell you, I expect that there's a possibility of a supplemental in this range. I'm not programming it, and I
Right.
won't until that money's in the account, because
Right.
that's how we've held the credit ratings where we have, is
Right.
we've just been responsible with it. But it's good for you to be aware and be aware early, and so I'm comfortable sharing where we are with that when we give a revenue number.
Yeah, if you could let us know at least what your projections are and what
Yeah.
you're basing that on, so that we can have an idea.
Yep.
Because I'd like to be able to say, hey, look, if we do come up with a higher amount than we're used to getting, or something than we got the previous year, if we had this wish list that we could check things off, and we know there's additionals coming in, we could start to check those things off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Oliver.
One more, thank you. Under parks, $1 million for parks capital projects. That won't go very far, but I'd like to know a list of what you selected.
Director Boyd is here, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. She's probably the best to answer that question.
Surprise.
Your number came up.
Phyllis Boyd, Director of Indy Parks. Was there a particular project?
You have a list of all the projects. Is it a long list? I mean, for $1 million, I just,
It's not long, no. So the first project was the Grassy Creek land acquisition. Then there's Gustafson Park, Bethel Park, Watkins Park, and Pride Park. That's the list. And
thank you, 'cause I'm going out to Bethel in a short while. I'll give them that information for the capital improvement project. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from councilors on this proposal? Any questions or comments from the public on proposal number 206? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to send proposal number 206 to the full council to do pass the recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you both.
Chairman. Thank you.
Hey, Ken, could I get a copy of that first slide digitally? That list of things that we've done? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So moving on to proposal number 210, which approves an additional appropriation totaling $5 million in the 2022 budget of the Department of Public Works, Transportation General, and Stormwater General Fund to finance increased contractual costs for the design, construction, and inspection of transportation and stormwater capital infrastructure projects. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dan Parker, Director of DPW again. The first proposal 206 was the fun one. This is the more technical and unfun one. So this proposal, in summary, is really a technical fiscal appropriation to recapture dollars that are closed out from construction contracts. Instead of having them revert to our fund balance, we'd like to see them reappropriated into our 2022 budget to cover the costs that we're seeing related to those, the increase in costs in the construction market. So the first slide here, it's called PO closeouts because that's what construction contracts would have purchase orders tied to them. So in May, our finance team, led by our CFO, Amanda Ortman, and our deputy CFO, who's here, Lauren Stevenson, went through, you see each of the accounts where we closed out construction contracts or inspection contracts or things related to construction in each of our funds, both on the transportation and the stormwater side. You can see that we almost closed out $4 million worth of purchase orders on the transportation side and a little more than $1 million on the stormwater side. So we're asking for $5 million. And the next slide will show to you, these are all the construction contracts that we have for 2022. As you can see, the engineer's estimate is what our consultants and our engineering team worked on for what we thought these projects would cost. The low bid, so actually put them out to bid and the contractors, we get them under contract, you can see that we're over $12 million in local funds, more than what the engineer's estimates were. That's transportation. On the stormwater side, we're a little more than $2.3 million above engineer's estimate. So all told, we're over $15 million above where we thought we would be. So this $5 million technical fiscal reappropriation would cut into that $15 million figure to help our 2022 budget. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. But, and we've got plenty of financial team members here that can answer any of those technical financial questions as well.
Thank you, Director. So the largest reason for this overage, I guess you would call it, in expense for these projects would be attributed to the rise in materials and labor and things like that.
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with the market. This is a very tight market for construction. You have NDOT doing a lot of work in Marion County. You have the airport. You have Indigo. You have CEG. You have obviously DPW. So it's a very tight market for capacity of construction companies to get things done. Mm-hmm. You also have the material costs. You have, the rise in fuel costs. So all of those things combined are leading to, you saw on the you want to flip back to the transportation, the last two bids, we didn't have anybody bid at all. I mean, we had two bridge projects and nobody bid. So we got to put them back out. Mm-hmm. And so when you have a situation when nobody's bidding on a project that's pretty significant, you can see what kind of construction market it is out there. David Borden, our administrator of construction, is here. He can answer any technical questions related to the rise in prices. But the one I would highlight that not all of the expense is borne in the figures down below. I said local funds. The 30th Street Bridge over the White River, we originally estimated that to be about $7.8 million, and it came in at $15 million. We had one bidder for almost 8. It was one bidder, David, correct? Second time. Oh, first time we had one. Second time we had two. So that's the kind of what's going on out there related to the construction industry and trying to deliver these projects. The goal on this is to make sure that we don't have to push out and delay the projects that you and our constituents are sort of counting on.
Yes, looking at these numbers, I mean, it looks like almost every one of them is over the projections. Yeah, so that's pretty significant. Questions, comments from councilors? Councilor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Parker. Is there any other reason why these numbers would be going up so much other than just the fact that, like, NDOT's doing work, the airport's doing work, because they've always been around as well? Like, is inflation playing a massive role in this as well?
I mean, there's obviously folks know that there's inflation out there, and it's part of it. It hasn't struck all of our projects. I'd ask David to come up in terms of what we're seeing the most. A lot of it relates to steel. And a lot of it is, quite honestly, is supply chain with coming out of the pandemic. But David, you want to add anything further?
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm David Borden, Construction Administrator for DPW Engineering. There's several factors. I've been talking with a lot of our contractors about this very particular thing. The ready mix, so concrete, asphalt, and steel, pretty much the three main things that we need to build anything. IMI, or not IMI, the Ready Mix Association, they're down drivers by about 50% right now. So something that's plaguing us in operations, but as well as other industries that we're depending on. So there's fuel surcharges for that. So they're raising prices. They cannot get Portland cement, which is the main ingredient in concrete. Don't know when that's going to maybe break free, but we're looking at least 18 months in that. Steel, so ductile iron, steel is used in that for utilities to be relocated. All of these delays are just compounding. Not to mention petroleum costs have increased. From last year to this year, we've seen an increase in petroleum asphalt, which for transportation is primarily the sole product we use. 18 to 23% increase in petroleum costs, just the liquid, not including anything else, just to get asphalt down. So those are like the primary factors. So materials, supply chain, so just getting them from point A to point B. Not to mention equipment, they cannot get parts to fix. Like these are, when you think of a ready mix concrete batching plant or an asphalt batching plant, that's significant equipment. There's only a few of them around. When they break down, they can't get parts. So all these things are contributing to prices.
So when I said the airport, they're doing a major concrete project on one of the runways. If anyone heard the executive director, Mario Rodriguez, at the chamber event, he said they were laying enough concrete to do a 4-lane road from Indianapolis to Terre Haute. So you add that to the amount of concrete that NDOT's doing for I-69, there's not a lot of concrete in the Indianapolis market.
Correct.
So when I say a lot of us are doing a lot of work at the same time. Obviously, we all do work every year, but when NDOT's spending $2 billion in Indianapolis,
yeah,
$2 billion in Indianapolis, it has an effect. I mean, it's great for the construction in roadways, but it does have an effect with prices.
Yeah, 3 major projects that have never.
What projects is NDOT doing in Marion County? Because I know they have the state roads outside 465. Is it like all that, or they're?
So they have I-69 on the south side.
Yeah.
They have the I-69, 465 clear path on the northeast side, and they still have the north split that they're completing. So those, I'd ask Erica. Erica, do you know the total? I-69 alone is $2 billion in Marion County, right?
I think that's accurate, yes.
And then clear path, the north split is almost $400 million. So these
It's all
are massive
interstate, though.
projects.
It's all interstate.
It's primarily interstate. They are doing some. I know that there's a project on US 36. How many others do you have that you're aware of? We have to do the coordination with them on all of these, so that's why I'm calling her.
They're starting I-65 on the south side, but it's not under construction yet. So you listed the ones that are under construction.
Councilor Carlino.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Banner, I'm glad you asked that question. I want to actually point out that it trickles down to our smaller businesses and smaller concrete outfits. I just want a little tiny sidewalk on my property, and my stepdad is a concrete and landscape company owner. I've been waiting since late September of last year. I know the guy and I'm good for the money, and I still don't have my little baby sidewalk. So to that point, it is absolutely difficult to just get supplies right now. And what I've been hearing is, you can set up the job or you can do certain things indoors, but even with the rain, that's also impacted some of these things too. But it's wildly, wildly expensive to get what 6 months ago was maybe difficult to get, but was still fairly priced and was hit and miss, and now it's a completely different market. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Councilor Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. this would be more of a finance question. Do we know the delta between 2021 and 2022 of the difference in percentages between low bid and actual cost?
We could have that put together and sent to you.
So the reason I'm questioning that is I would assume that we knew these projects were coming, that the airport was doing their stuff, the state was doing their stuff, and that there was going to be a high demand for concrete, and that our consultants and our estimators should have been able to put that into their calculations when putting together estimates of this year.
So the estimates, Erica, do you want to come back up? I mean, the estimates are put together related to what things cost, what the average costs are for projects at that time during design. So you want to go through the estimating process?
Yeah, the engineering consultants provide estimates at every stage of submittal, and each time they put it together, so usually at 30%, 60%, 90% in final, they're using the available current bid tab information that we can get from INDOT, and we have specific bid information for DPW. I guess I would also add that INDOT is also experiencing this, where their bids are coming in about the same percentage over their engineers' estimates too.
And this is why I'm curious in the delta, because if we're 15 this year, then perhaps that's average, but if we're consistently at 5% year over year for a 10-year span, and then this year we're at 15, we should have done a better job at anticipating with these shortages, knowing these projects were coming up. So, interested in seeing the delta.
We can put that together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions or comments from counselors on this proposal? Any questions or comments from the public on proposal number 210? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion. So moved. Is there a second? Second. It has been moved and seconded to send proposal number 210 to the full council with a due pass recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, Director. Now, who's doing the...
I'm going to move over, and Joe Gear from HNTB.
Okay.
I'll control the computer.
Okay, great.
Joe, come on up to the mic.
Come on up, Joe, and introduce yourself.
There you go.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Joe Gare. I'm a vice president with HNTB here in Indianapolis. Do you want to give me a preamble?
No. Well, Mr. Chairman, Dan Parker again. I want to thank Joe for coming in. This was a study that we conducted. It's a very similar study to what Joe did for INDOT prior to the 2017 legislative session, where there was really an overhaul of gas taxes and funding for INDOT. That study he did for INDOT, we wanted done for the city of Indianapolis to really identify the need that we have. We don't need to tell anybody that we need more money. The question is always, how much is it? And really put a figure on. So this is all a data-driven report that we asked Joe and his team to put together over at HNTB, and I'm going to let him walk you through it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the overall goal, next slide, was to look at options for a long-term, financially sustainable road program. And very consistent with what the state did, we were recommending a two-step process. Step one is, so don't start talking about money right away. Step one is, what do you want to buy? And then step two is, what are the options? How do you pay for it? And so there's no right answer to any of those, either of those questions. But the presentation I'm going to go through today focuses on that first step. What does Indianapolis want to buy? And as Dan mentioned, the overall approach was to take a data-driven. We wanted to just get our arms around the needs of all these assets. So DPW maintains, I think the official term is a ton of assets that support traffic and the road system.
That's my word.
Yeah. And so you'll see this is just a running list, right? There's thoroughfare payments and residential payments and bridges and pedestrian bridges and signals and signs and sidewalks and culverts and retaining walls. In each case, the report that is behind this goes through asset by asset and looks at the inventory and a data-driven approach to how much money is needed for those assets. So on the next slide, you see that there is kind of, for each, the report goes through each asset and asks 3 key questions. First of all is, what does Indianapolis own? Right? How much of it is there out there? And then the next important question is, what condition is it in? And then based on that condition information, you could answer the third one, which was how much money is needed to maintain those. And I'll just go through it a couple examples, or the big ticket items, to give you a flavor of the report. So I'll start with pavements. First question, how much pavement does Indianapolis maintain? It's about 8,500 lane miles. So we broke it down into centerline miles and lane miles. Also, throughout the report, it's broken down the residential system versus the thoroughfare system. And one of this graph shows that the growth of the inventory over time. You can see how the network grows. Next important question is, what condition is it in? And so throughout, we used, I think in almost all the cases, good, fair, poor. And then one of the things I wanted to point out here is that this is how assets deteriorate. And if you can catch assets here when they're in this fair range, it costs a lot less long-term than letting it fall down and reconstruct. And we all know that because of our houses and our cars and all that. But that's the same approach for these assets. So with these pie charts show the good, fair, poor breakdown between thoroughfare and residential. And so on the left, you see the thoroughfare is about 19% good, 44 fair, 37 poor. That's a different story than the residential. The residential, you see a lot fewer good and a lot more poor, and that reflects the emphasis over the past few years. Next question is, how much do you need for pavements? Again, there's no right answer. One right answer. It depends on what you want to do. And so the DPW used a pavement management system to, each line is, here's the condition, and each line is a funding level. And so if you want to achieve a targeted condition, you need $132 million a year. If you want to maintain current conditions, you need $119 million a year. And at the current spending amount over time, in about 2028 or so, you see things really start to fall off, and that's about $25 million. So that's a scenario just to look at. Here we are today, how much we spend and what the implications of that. That was for thoroughfares. Similar story, but much bigger numbers on the residential side, and that's because of that pie chart I showed you, which is just there's a lot more poor there. So we did the same thing for, and I'm going to just keep flying through, but feel free to stop. Same story on bridges. In each case, how many bridges does Indianapolis maintain? It's 510. The important thing here, this is a histogram that shows when those bridges were built. And just like everywhere else in the country in the 1960s, 1950s, 60s, 70s, that was a big time of expansion for the bridging. So over time, soon, over the next 10, 20 years, you're going to start to see the needs of those bridges go up significantly more than what we're talking about today, because they're reaching it's about 75 years life of a bridge.
Also, we expanded our city limits too. We're in the 60s, into the 60s, right? So our city went to the county lines. So all those bridges in the county.
Right, Mr. Chairman. The bridge dates are whether they were built by Indianapolis DOT or the Marion County Highway Department. So all of that is accounted for in the date of when the bridge was built. Because most bridges in most counties were actually built by the county, not by the city. Counties tend to have more jurisdiction over bridges. So Marion County, before Unigov, had a lot more jurisdiction over bridges.
So what condition are the bridges in? This is a rating scale that's used nationally. It's required for all bridges over 20 feet. But if there's a rating system, inspectors go out and look at the bridge and rate all of them. And then you see the same good, fair, poor for the bridges. As I mentioned, these are different looking graphs than what you saw on the pavement. The bridges tend to be in better shape relative to pavements, but their time is going to come. And then how much is needed for bridges? These numbers are, when the inspectors go out and rate it, they look at it and they say, recommend this work, recommend this work, recommend this work. There's a list for every bridge. And so you'll see, it's about $15 million. In the short term, it kind of goes down and fluctuates. Again, we would expect this to go up significantly after this time horizon. So So that's kind of a whirlwind tour about how we handled pavements, how we handled bridges. You could take those same concepts and apply that to all of those assets that I talked about, and the report walks through asset by asset and tells you that story. So then, shifting gears, we wanted to talk about the funding status quo. And so this is the projected funding available for capital projects. And you'll see that in 2021, it starts to go down, 22, 23, and then there's a pretty significant drop-off in 24 and 25. So far, all I've been talking about is how much do we need. Now we're starting to add the other element, which is what is expected, how much funding is expected. Any more you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, what I would say is these numbers are the numbers that come from our capital plan that we submit with the budget. As you can see, I thought this was the power one. Obviously, it's not. Somebody have a charger? What you can see here is what between the mayor's commitment to infrastructure and what the council has approved, we have put a lot more revenue towards capital infrastructure. Obviously, those were policy decisions. Tonight, we appropriated another $13 million for that will go into that 2022. Thank you. It's right here. The other thing I would say is that the 2023 figure does not account for the $50 million that we allocated from the ARP that went into the stormwater side, that we went into thoroughfare drainage projects. So that's on that side of the equation. But what you can see is that the consistent revenue that DPW can rely on, which is really what Joe was talking about in his slides about current funding, it drops off when you kind of take away those policy decisions that we've made to use TIF, to use COIT, to use all of these additional revenues that the controller has identified and the mayor's made a priority and this council has passed to put towards this.
But we won't know that until we get to those.
Right, but Mr. Chairman, the first capital plan that I submitted to you as a director in 2017, the spending was $65 million. We spent over $180 million last year. With the $13 million that you just passed for a recommendation to the full council to pass, we will be up over $180 million for transportation this year. What Joe is talking about here and what this conversation is really about that's leading to is we have to have a sustainable, because even the 180 isn't enough. As you're about to see when we get to the next slide.
Right. Yes. Okay, so the next, and then, there's one more thing on the need side. I talked about all of the maintaining what you have, what we have. I forgot to talk about planning for the future, which is all those, the thoroughfare improvements, which we came up a little bit earlier today in the last conversation about those projects that are in the long-range plan. So we captured the cost of those.
So thoroughfare improvements, just so you know, that's the kind of thing that Councilor Maury was mentioning about Thompson Road. Correct. Thoroughfare improvements that, because of their cost, they're in the long-range transportation plan. They're not in the current. They're not in our DPW capital program for the next 5 years. They're in the long-range plan.
So we captured the cost of those too. Okay, so now we started to build, we talked about the needs, we talked about how much money is available, so now we can do some math and come up with a gap. And I mentioned that there's no one right answer about what Indianapolis wants to buy. So what you see up here is a series of scenarios. Each scenario costs money, but each scenario gets you more. So the first one is maintain 2022 funding. If you do that, you get the recommended work for the roadway, and you get 2022 funding for all other assets. Okay? So then we said, okay, well, what if you want to go beyond that? What if we want to do the recommended work for the thoroughfare pavements and for culverts and signs and signals? That's scenario 2. And then we just kept adding check marks as we went down. And here in scenario 3, that's where we added the thoroughfare enhancements. In 4, we added the recommended work for residential pavements, and then it gets really exciting when you add sidewalks and pedestrian bridges. So each scenario, each of these 5 scenarios is one view of the world about what Indianapolis could buy. You get a certain amount of work out of it. And then at the end, at the bottom of that, is the average annual funding gap. And so this is over the next 5 years.
So if you look at 2022, we just said we're going to be just short of $180 million. Just to deal with scenario one, what this is saying to us is that we're $60 million short to do that.
Right.
That's right.
But this also doesn't take into account sustaining what you've achieved through that process, right? So we'd have to have, say if we did option number 5, we'd have to come up with that additional $1 billion every year.
Yeah, that's the entire city budget every year.
Every year, right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's an annual number.
yeah,
That's correct. Yeah.
That's an annual number.
right.
That's right. Yeah.
So it wasn't in there. We tried to condense the slides. It's obviously a much bigger report, but to put a sidewalk on every street in Indianapolis that does not have one would be $7.2 billion. So now you know why that's $1 billion per year.
Right.
That's a lot of money each year to try to get a sidewalk everywhere. But this gets us to right up to the next step, which is how do you pay for it? And that's the conversation that, based on the report that Joe made and having conversations with our partners down the other end of the street and figuring out things related to the federal funding, how do we increase this budget and make it sustainable? So you saw in here the center line number versus the lane mile. That's going to become a hot topic. How did we get here? That's part of it. So we're going to have those conversations, but this was the first step to be able to have those conversations, because you can't tell folks, we need more money. Well, how much? We don't know. Well, now we know.
Now we know.
Now we know. And based on what do we want to buy?
Right.
So, do you have anything else to add?
Mr. Chairman.
We've got some questions. I'm going to start with Councilman Cole and then Councilman Gray.
Sorry, I'll get it in a minute. So just say we go with scenario 4, the last one, right? So the 1 billion, that wouldn't be needed for the forever, right? Because at some point you have everything, and then we're just at the dollar to cost to maintain and not the $8 to $10 to maintain. So that number would eventually, at some point, once everything is done, that number would go down, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So this is a 5-year view, but it goes on for longer.
Okay.
And the reason why is, so Dan mentioned there's the significant cost of adding sidewalks. We didn't take that number and divide by 5.
Right.
And say we're going to do that every year. Right? It's a longer term, not longer number of years. The same with those thoroughfare improvement projects. That's a 20-year plan, so we divided by 20. And we said, okay, well, over the course of 20 years, we're going to pay. Right? Spread that cost out for 20 years. On the pavement side, the money that you saw, that is, in terms of when you look at pavement running and the optimal pavement level of pavement funding and the condition target, that is a long-term steady state. Right? So you want to maintain, the idea is you maintain that over the long term. So you're correct in that, and over time you're going to start to chip away at the backlog of things, and you're going to see that go down. And so this is a 5-year view, and I think, and I can't remember right off the top of my head how long that goes out, but it's longer. It does go out.
Okay, thank you. Do you think it's, sorry, so this is 5, is it 20 years,
It's closer to
50
20.
years?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Councilor Gray, then Councilor Jones, then Councilor Oliver.
I was just concerned if this money here, I was concerned if this money here also includes maintenance money. But once we do these streets, or when we do these projects, by the time we get to the next project, some of this back here is going to need to have some work done to it. So if we spend all this money creating new stuff and not put something in the budget to maintain what we just done, then we're going to, at the end of the 5 years, we might be right back where we are today.
Councilor Gray, I would say 2 things to that. One, our O&M costs are in our operations division, so this would allow them to catch up. But I think that the other thing, really a lot of this is not new. This is taking care of all of the tons of stuff that we already have, so it's really a lot of reconstruction. But I think that graph that Joe showed here is, to your point, is that, and I think this goes, it's a good follow-up to what Councilor McCormick said, is that You guys are picking residential streets that are down there at the 8 to 10. What Joe's graph has shown is if we could save a lot of money taking care of things if we're rehabbing it, i.e. maintenance, back when it's starting to fall and catching it then. These kind of numbers, if we were sustaining our funding the appropriate way, long term, and mind you, this is a generational problem. This administration didn't cause it. The previous administration didn't cause it. This has been created over 50 years of Marion County being shortchanged on a lot of different tax revenue sources, whether it's income taxes, whether it's gas taxes, whether it's community crossing, whether it's federal funding. Marion County doesn't get its fair share no matter who it's getting it from. No matter who. I mean, even you can look at wheel tax. Wheel tax, we collect wheel tax, but if that person's license plate, and go down and look at all the trucking companies in Marion County, that license plate's not from Indianapolis or Indiana, we don't get wheel tax on it, although they use our roads. So every mechanism that helps go fund roads in Indianapolis, we're getting shortchanged.
Well, I think we all understand that, Dan. But whether it's new construction or repaired construction, eventually the repaired construction is going to have to be repaired again.
Right.
So if we, somewhere in this schedule of events, allocation of money, we can't. If we get 10 million, we can't spend 10 million because we got to save some of that 10 million to take care of the back end. Because if we don't, if we spend the 10 million and don't take care of the back end, then eventually we're going to have to start back here and start all over again.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's part of the reason why over the last 5 years our strategy has been to not only invest in capital, but also invest in new equipment and new people for our operations division as well. Thank you.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for this report. The numbers are very helpful to look at and to digest. And Director Parker, you know this question's coming. Is there a way that, or did you look at for the residential pavement, do alleys qualify or could they qualify under that residential pavement? So in my district, we use the alleys as streets. Many of our residents don't have driveways and they're used as streets. He knew it was coming. He knew it was coming. Is there any way that some of our alleys that are just, they cannot drive down them, that they would qualify under that residential pavement? Thank you very much.
The residential pavement is for residential street classifications, and alleys are not streets. And so they do not qualify for any road tax funding. So alley improvements are not in this report at all because this is our street network, and alleys aren't part of the street network.
And there's no way to change the language to get a couple alleys in this funding?
I mean, we could talk offline on that one.
Thank you, sir.
That's a bottomless pit of a question.
It always is.
That would go on
But
forever.
I knew the question was coming because it's been a consistent one.
Councilor Oliver.
About, what are the numbers on, if we had a toll for the city of Indianapolis, commuter tax would pay for a bond?
So
would it
Councilor-
generate enough revenue to pay for a bond? I mean, you ever crushed those numbers? How much we could borrow, and would a commuter tax pay for it? Make the payments?
So this report did not get into step 2, which at the beginning of the thing, step 2 was how do we pay for it? Those conversations are just beginning. So Joe was not tasked with looking into a commuter tax or tolling or revamping the road funding point. Those are things we're now getting into in conversations with our partners at the state. But I believe you know the answer to the question on tolling. It's not allowed.
I need more information.
But we can't toll local streets.
Oh, I see.
I don't think we can.
There, you could do like a cordon like a New York City model, where you would toll people right, when they crossed into a certain barrier.
Yeah, so, I mean, I thought that the state legislature had kind of barred tolling inside 465.
Oh, I was thinking from the federal requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't looked at it at the state, I'm sorry.
When you anticipate that you have some information about that?
So, there's a legislative session starting in January, so there'll be a lot more conversations about that.
Thank you.
Councilor Hart.
And I raised my hand too soon. I imagined that my questions would be questioned, but I did think of something that pertained to Councilor Jones, which is I would imagine if we were reconstructing a lot of roads, there'd be a lot of millings left over that we could lay down potentially inside of alleyways that could at least improve them slightly. It's constructive thinking.
I would say, Councilor Hart, great minds think alike. Our District 4, when they do milling on maintenance, they do take millings from those jobs and take them to alleys that need it bad, drop the material and roll it. And so, excuse me, I'm going to, Steve?
Bless you.
Sorry. And so we are doing that currently. That's out of our District 4 garage out at 5 Points in Troy.
We just have to be deliberate about that too, because whenever millings end up in many of the alleys downtown, they're not graded flat. So anytime you have a rain, all your millings go from the alley to the drains. And so they literally just have a big hill of millings at the end of the alley. So I would careful what you wish for. So, any other question? Councilor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Parker and Joe. Joe, when you did the study for the state back in 2016, did they also task you with scenario 2, offering recommendations on how to meet the needs of the state?
Yes.
Has the city discussed that with you at all?
We have not yet.
Is it in the plan too?
Could be. I don't want to negotiate a contract with them here on.
Well, no, I'm just. Well, I wouldn't expect you to. It would just be. I think it would just be important for us to know if that's actually happening, or if it was, thank you for the info. We're going to go battle the State House now.
We're gonna employ as much as we can in terms of the task to try to convince folks at the other end of Market Street that Marion County taxpayers. And this is the mayor's position, we already pay a lot of money in gas taxes that are not returned to us on a lot of different sources. And so we're gonna have that sort of debate about investing in this region, because the problems facing Marion County related to all the state funding formulas affect all of our partners around us. And so this is not just an Indianapolis problem with all these funding formulas. It's an entire central Indiana problem. What's happening to us now is happening primarily because we have a lot of it, and it's old. The donuts, they're building out, and they're not getting as much money on that center line mile, and their traffic is going up, so they're having to widen roads and do all of those things. And so it's going to catch up to them as well.
Yeah.
Our analysis of the gas tax formula is that Marion County has about 12% of all the traffic in the state, and we have 4% of the center line miles. So that gap is what has caused, over the generations, this problem. The counties that surround us have 16% of the traffic of the state, and right now they have 11% of the center line miles. So their gap is 5 and growing. So the problems that we face now are coming to the neighborhoods that surround us. The difference is 30 years ago, a lot of those communities didn't exist, and so their pavement is younger. So when Joe says a lot of our stuff's old, it's more expensive for us and a lot of it falls apart. I mean, Fishers doesn't have brick foundation streets. We still do.
Train tracks underneath the pavement. Things,
that too.
Yeah.
So this is the problem, and it's not just the gas tax formula, it's the community crossing. Indianapolis gets 12 cents for every $1 we contribute to that fund. Ohio County gets $4 for every $1 they contribute. Now, is that fair? to Marion County taxpayers? Our answer is, it's not. Ohio County gets $19 per vehicle mile traveled. Marion County gets $3.22. So we get 16% of what the smallest county in the state gets. Hamilton County gets 20% of what Ohio County gets. So the fundamental question that we're going to pose to the legislature is, this central Indiana region is the economic engine of the entire state, and yet it is underinvesting in the transportation network for this region, with Indianapolis being the bulk of it. So thank you for having us present this tonight.
Well, so is the state very receptive when you explain this to them? Like, do they at least acknowledge that it's an issue? Or is it just that the state's dominated by rural interests and they tell you to come back next session?
Next week, I'm on a panel with the chairman of the House Roads and Transportation Committee, Mayor Fadness, and I will share a panel. And all the topics of conversation are road funding. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, because I think it's just important, like, when we pointed out to the state, like, even if we maxed out all of our revenue streams, it gets us like $48 million a year. And the fact that we need to be closer to, I think you have to be at scenario 4 at least, and it's like, that gets us like, what, 15% of the way?
Is that the 600 million one?
Yeah, the 635 shortfall. Yeah.
So actually you need closer to like 800 million. If you were to add the 180 million on top of that.
Right.
That we currently spend.
But the
That's in
projection for
2022.
next year.
correct.
Yeah.
The projection for
Yeah,
next
because
year.
this is the gap based on 2022.
Mm-hmm.
What was the
We're saying
projection
that
for
right,
next
right,
year was, what was that?
So if you go up.
155-ish.
Sorry, one more, right there, yeah. So the gap is defined by taking all of that 22, 23, 24, 25, taking that and summing it, and then
And then
comparing it to the
subtract, yeah.
needs. Comparing it to
So-
the needs, doing that yearly.
Yeah,
taking an average.
so, yeah, we're projected to spend the 80 million as opposed to where we're at now,
Yeah,
170 million.
That's right.
And just so you know, this one, so we believe that this document is a living, breathing document. And so, obviously, with the budget, you will see a 2022 to 2026 capital plan. And so we're working on that right now. So there'll be another year added. So there'll be a sort of new baseline to base all these numbers off of. But I would say, when you look at this, the numbers are smaller than the original report that Joe made. He's updated this report for us with new data and with the new spending. And so we've actually cut into this. The original column 1 was $68 million. Well, we're at 60. So we've been throwing every available dollar at this problem. We did that tonight with the COIT fiscal. So every time there's money available, transportation infrastructure has been a priority for the mayor and for this council. I've heard it repeatedly from each one of you on your priorities to see in the next budget. So $3 million for residential design. I feel confident that the controller is going to have to find that money, because there's a lot of you that really want to see those projects built.
Right.
Does the administration or the city have a scenario that they want to target?
Yes, something that adds millions.
Well, is that the extent of the discussion?
Well, the extent of the discussion is what's available to us to do locally, we don't feel is fair to Marion County taxpayers, because they're already overpaying on gas taxes. They're not getting their fair share on that. They pay the registration fees that go into the community crossing fund. They're not getting their fair share back on that. So the $25 million that we could generate from raising the wheel tax, Marion County taxpayers should not have to burden more for roads when we lose $79 million a year in those who drive on our streets, live in other counties but work in Marion County. When there's 167,000 per year that drive in. So having that sort of conversation is such that we know we need more money, but we've been doing that with the actions that we've done with proposing to the council and the council insisting on seeing more dollars in this budget. It's a much larger budget than it's ever been. In the 8 years that the mayor's been in office, if you include the 2023 figures that have been budgeted, we are on pace to spend more than $1 billion just on transportation infrastructure. $1 billion. The previous 5 years, the last 5 years of the Ballard administration, 6 years, excuse me, $687 million was spent. That was done by selling an asset. We have not sold an asset, and we have not raised taxes. We've put every available dollar into it, and we're up there close to $200 million per year. That's what we're going to continue to do, but we're going to have the conversation with the state to see if we can get our fair share.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Director. Councilor Carlino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious if we don't get the response from the state that we would hope in the millions, to quote you. Are there other avenues that we can explore, whether it be with our elected officials or even, you know, are there conversations happening even nationally? I know we have, you know, great representation in our congressmen. I know we have, I believe, a Hoosier serving as our transportation director or secretary. Are there letters we can write? Are there conversations?
Former mayor.
Mayor Pete, is that his name?
Yeah.
Pete Buttigieg?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wonder, are there other avenues that we can explore or maybe ask for letters of support in this conversation that maybe would help, you know, Senator Braun or something like that?
So that's a great question, because I get this question a lot about the federal bipartisan infrastructure bill. DPW does not get a dedicated amount per year from that bill. We're not like the airport. We're not like Indigo. We don't get a line item. We have to compete with those dollars in the MPO. So the problem in the MPO is that Indianapolis is one of 40 communities that compete for dollars. If you want another sort of standard thing, we're over 50% of the population of the MPO, but we get around 31 to 35% of the money each year. And that's because we have to share it with 40 other communities. We are being very strategic on grant applications that we're making to USDOT for projects that would fit the sort of programs that they've created. So the last one we did was raise grant to look at all the one-ways, convert them to two-way. Those are things that are on our list to do, but we always build into that sort of pavement restoration. So they're expensive, but it's partly because we want to rebuild the road while we're doing it. We put in an infra grant to try to get County Line Road done. So those really expensive projects that we couldn't afford on our own is what we see for USDOT and what we've been working with the Congressman's office on. Senator Young and Senator Braun have supported every single project that DPW has submitted to USDOT. So we have support from both the House and the Senate. And so this past year, we got a support letter from Congressman Pence, even though he doesn't represent Indianapolis. I believe the new 6th district is going to take in the south side of Indianapolis, so he did support our County Line Road. He was aware of the project, so he did support it. So we're getting support, but it's not, federal money's not a guarantee, and it's not a substitute for sustainable funding. So we're looking at it for very specific, expensive projects that are in our pipeline that need to be done, but we just don't have the money to do them.
Thank you, Director. And what I hear, though, is that in terms of policy, you know, when we all put into a pot, we want to grow communities that maybe don't have the revenue there, but I think there comes a question of equity. There comes a question of socioeconomic status and other things. And so I guess my question was more, how can we have those policy conversations with our federal leaders to maybe help support some of the policy changes that maybe in a two-way dialogue aren't moving?
Thank you for that question. I would highly recommend that this not just be an administration talking with legislators. If each one of you could talk to the legislators from Marion County. There's several legislators from Marion County, both D and R, that are very engaged on this. We need every Marion County legislator engaged on this issue. And I would say the road issue and all the things we're talking about, it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. I mean, it's a rural, urban, suburban issue, big time between the rural and urban, but becoming a bigger problem for the suburban counties.
As they start to experience more of what we've been doing.
Right.
Yeah, Councilor Gray.
Is there a match that come with those federal dollars?
The match requirement is, they range depending 20 to 25%.
So even if we get those grants, there's still quite a bit of financial responsibility there for Marion County.
That's correct. That's why we don't put in for every program, but we put in for things that what we see as strategically important. But really, road reconstruction is really a part of every grant application we do, just because it takes care of something while we're doing it. So you hear one-way to two-way conversions, that doesn't sound like a road being rebuilt, but we build that into the budget for what we're asking for from DOT. Hopefully we get it.
Very good, thank you. And thank you, Director, and thanks to HNTB and Councilor Bain for pushing forward with this. It was really enlightening. I think we all had an idea of where these numbers were. It's kind of painful to see it all laid out in front of us, but hopefully you guys have all your pokers in the fire and ready to take this information to the state to try to figure out solutions to these problems. Any other questions or comments from councilors? Anyone from the public have any questions on this report? Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I guess Councilor Bain's got you hired. Hey, Josh. Joe really appreciates that.
Yeah, thank you.